The morning sun shone through the large windows of the airport terminal as Zoe adjusted her backpack, following a few steps behind her adoptive mother, Lisa. The crowd moved in waves around them, a sea of travelers rushing to their gates. Zoe kept her eyes down, focusing on the polished floor tiles that reflected the overhead lights. "Hurry up," Lisa called over her shoulder, not bothering to look back. "We're going to miss our boarding call." Zoe quickened her pace, clutching the strap of her backpack tighter. At 16, she stood tall and confident despite the tension that always seemed to hover between her and Lisa. Her dark curls were pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore her favorite university sweatshirt, a gift from her biological aunt, who had promised to help her apply there in a year. They reached Gate 24 just as the airline staff announced pre-boarding for families with small children and those needing extra assistance. Lisa pushed forward, dragging her carry-on behind her. "We should wait for our boarding group," Zoe suggested softly. "They called for families with small children." Lisa turned, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't tell me what to do," she snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to glance their way. "I've been flying since before you were born." Zoe felt heat rise to her cheeks as she noticed an older couple exchanging looks. This was nothing new. These small, public moments of embarrassment had become part of her daily life since Lisa and her husband Tom had adopted her 3 years ago after her parents died in a car accident. Tom was kind, but traveled constantly for work, leaving Zoe alone with Lisa most of the time. When their boarding group was finally called, they joined the line. A flight attendant with a name tag reading Sophia greeted passengers at the entrance to the jet bridge, her smile warm and genuine. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," Sophia said as Lisa approached, barely acknowledging her. But when Zoe stepped forward, Sophia's eyes brightened. "I love your sweatshirt. Are you planning to go there? For college?" Before Zoe could answer, Lisa cut in. "We need to board. People are waiting behind us." Sophia's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes, a brief recognition of the tension. "Of course, you're in seats 14C and D, middle of the aircraft on the right." As they made their way down the narrow aisle of the plane, Lisa insisted Zoe take the middle seat while she sat in the aisle. "I don't want to be trapped if I need to use the restroom," she explained, though Zoe knew the real reason. Lisa hated the idea of sitting between Zoe and a stranger, as if proximity to her adopted daughter made her uncomfortable. A young man, about college age, was already seated by the window, earbuds in and head bobbing slightly to music only he could hear. He smiled and nodded as they took their seats, then returned his attention to the view outside. Zoe settled in, placing her backpack under the seat in front of her. She pulled out her book, a novel her English teacher had recommended, and opened it to where she had left off. Reading was her escape, her way of traveling beyond the confines of her complicated home life. "Put that away," Lisa whispered harshly. "You need to pay attention to the safety demonstration." Zoe obediently closed her book and tucked it into the seat pocket, though the flight attendants hadn't even begun their pre-flight routine. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to take up as little space as possible, a habit she'd developed living with Lisa. More passengers filed in, filling the plane with the sounds of shuffling feet, overhead bins closing, and quiet conversations. A family with 2 small children took the row across from them, the parents working together to get the kids settled with coloring books and small toys. Lisa watched them with narrowed eyes. "Some people shouldn't travel with children if they can't keep them quiet," she muttered, though the children were being perfectly well behaved. Zoe said nothing, staring straight ahead at the safety card in the seat pocket. She had learned that responding to Lisa's comments usually made things worse. Sophia appeared in their section of the cabin, helping an elderly woman store her bag in the overhead bin. Her movements were efficient but patient, her smile never faltering as she assured the woman her bag would be safe. When she finished, she glanced down their row and caught Zoe's eye, giving her a small wink. That tiny gesture of kindness made Zoe's heart lift. Sometimes it was the smallest things that got her through the day, a teacher's encouraging word, a friend's text message, or now, a flight attendant's wink. These moments reminded her that the world was bigger than her current situation, that there were kind people out there. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard the 3-hour flight from Boston to Chicago. Zoe felt a flutter of excitement despite her unease. They were visiting Tom, who had been working in Chicago for the past month. She had missed him terribly, and the thought of seeing him made the tension with Lisa worth enduring. As the plane began to taxi, Zoe felt a familiar pressure in her bladder. She had been so nervous about getting to the airport on time that morning that she'd barely had a chance to use the restroom. "I need to use the bathroom," she whispered to Lisa. Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief. "Now? The seatbelt sign is on. You should have gone in the terminal." "I know, I'm sorry, but I really need to go." Lisa sighed dramatically. "You'll have to..." "Wait, they won't let you up now." The young man by the window, who had removed one earbud during the safety demonstration, leaned forward slightly. "Actually," he said in a friendly tone, "you can still go before takeoff. I just saw someone head to the bathroom." Lisa shot him a look that could freeze water. "Stay out of this," she said coldly. "She's my daughter, and I know the rules." The young man raised his eyebrows but said nothing more, replacing his earbud and turning back to the window. Zoe pressed her legs together, trying to ignore the discomfort. She knew Lisa was wrong. She had seen other passengers getting up, but challenging her would only make the situation worse. Sophia appeared in the aisle again, checking that seatbelts were fastened. When she reached their row, she smiled at them. "Everything okay here?" Before Lisa could answer, Zoe spoke up. "Actually, I really need to use the restroom. Is it still okay to go?" Sophia nodded. "Of course, honey. Just be quick before we take off." Lisa's face tightened, but with Sophia standing there, she had no choice but to unbuckle her seatbelt and stand to let Zoe out. As Zoe squeezed past, Lisa grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Don't make a habit of embarrassing me." Zoe hurried to the bathroom at the back of the plane, relief washing over her both from emptying her bladder and escaping Lisa's glare for a few moments. She looked at herself in the small mirror as she washed her hands. "Just 3 more hours," she told her reflection. "Then you'll see Tom." When she returned to her seat, Lisa had to stand again to let her in, making a show of how inconvenient it was. The young man by the window gave Zoe a sympathetic smile, which she returned gratefully. As the plane gathered speed and lifted into the air, Zoe watched the ground fall away below them. There was something magical about flying, about seeing the world from above where problems seemed smaller and possibilities endless. For a moment, she forgot about the tension with Lisa, lost in the wonder of being above the clouds. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the captain announced they had reached their cruising altitude. The flight attendants began preparing for beverage service, pushing carts slowly down the aisles. Lisa pulled out a magazine from her bag and began flipping through it, pointedly ignoring Zoe. This was fine with Zoe, who retrieved her book and found her place again, eager to dive back into the story. The cabin settled into the rhythm of flight, the steady hum of engines, occasional announcements from the captain about their route, and the quiet conversations of passengers around them. Zoe lost herself in her book, the outside world fading away as she turned page after page. She was startled back to reality when Sophia stopped her beverage cart beside their row. "What can I get for you folks?" she asked cheerfully, her eyes moving, from Lisa to Zoe and then to the young man by the window. "Coffee black," Lisa said curtly, not looking up from her magazine. "And for you?" Sophia asked Zoe directly, her voice warm. "Apple juice, please," Zoe replied with a smile. The young man asked for a soda, and Sophia efficiently prepared their drinks, handing them out with napkins. When she gave Zoe her apple juice, their fingers brushed briefly, and Sophia gave her another small wink. "Enjoy," she said before moving on to the next row. Zoe sipped her juice, feeling a strange sense of calm despite Lisa's coldness beside her. Something about Sophia's kindness made her feel seen in a way she rarely did at home. It was as if the flight attendant had somehow recognized that Zoe needed an ally, even if just for this short journey through the clouds. Little did she know that this simple flight was about to become much more turbulent than anyone could have predicted, and that Sophia's attentiveness would soon prove to be more important than anyone could imagine. The airplane hummed steadily as it cruised at 30,000 feet. Zoe had finished half her apple juice, careful not to spill a drop. She noticed how her adoptive mother Lisa kept glancing at other passengers, especially at the family with 2 children across the aisle. The parents were doing their best to keep the little ones entertained with coloring books and quiet games. "Look at those kids, so well behaved," whispered the elderly woman sitting behind them to her husband. "Their parents must be doing something right." Lisa's mouth tightened at these words. She took a sip of her black coffee, holding the cup with both hands as if to warm them, though the cabin was perfectly comfortable. Her knuckles turned white from her grip. "Unlike some children," Lisa muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Zoe to hear. Zoe pretended not to notice, keeping her eyes fixed on her book. Over the past 3 years since her adoption, she had learned that engaging with Lisa's comments only made things worse. She turned a page, though she hadn't really processed the last few paragraphs. The words blurred as her mind wandered to memories of happier times with her birth parents. The young man by the window had fallen asleep, his head resting against the glass, earbuds still in place. His gentle snoring created a rhythm that almost matched the hum of the engines. Lisa nudged Zoe sharply with her elbow. "Stop fidgeting, you're shaking the whole row." "Sorry," Zoe whispered, though she hadn't been moving at all. She tried to make herself even smaller in her seat, pulling her arms in closer to her body. 2 rows ahead, Sophia was helping an older passenger adjust his seat. Her movements were graceful and patient, her smile never faltering despite the man's repeated requests. When she finished, she turned and caught Zoe's eye briefly. Something in Sophia's gaze suggested she had been watching their row more carefully than it appeared. Lisa noticed this exchange and frowned. "Why is that flight attendant staring at us?" she hissed. "She's just doing her job," Zoe replied softly, wishing she could disappear into her book. "Don't talk back to me," Lisa snapped, loud enough that several nearby passengers glanced their way. The young man by the window stirred but didn't wake up. Heat rushed to Zoe's cheeks. Public embarrassment was one of Lisa's favorite tactics. At home it was cold silence and subtle cruelty, but in public Lisa seemed to enjoy making a scene and then acting like Zoe was the problem. Tom never saw this side of his wife. Lisa was careful to be the perfect spouse when he was around. Zoe's phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a text from Tom. "Can't wait to see you, kiddo. Just finished setting up the guest room. Got you those cookies you like." A small smile formed on Zoe's lips. 3 days with Tom in Chicago. 3 days where Lisa would have to be on her best behavior. 3 days of relief. "Who's texting you?" Lisa demanded, trying to peek at Zoe's screen. "It's just Tom," Zoe replied, showing her the message. "He's excited to see us." Lisa's expression softened slightly at the mention of her husband. "Well, he should be. He's been gone for weeks." She paused, then added with a hint of suspicion, "You two always did get along too well." The implication in her tone made Zoe's stomach tighten. Lisa often made comments like this, suggesting there was something inappropriate about Zoe's close relationship with Tom. In reality, Tom was simply the father figure Zoe had desperately needed after losing her parents, and he treated her with the kindness and respect that Lisa never showed when they were alone. "I'm going to use the restroom," Lisa announced suddenly, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Don't touch my things." As Lisa made her way down the aisle, Zoe exhaled slowly, feeling like she could breathe properly for the first time since boarding. These brief moments alone were precious. She texted Tom back, "Can't wait either. Flight is okay. See you soon." She hesitated, then added a heart emoji before sending the message. Lisa would hate that, but what Lisa didn't see wouldn't hurt her. The young man beside her stirred, removing one earbud. "Hey," he said sleepily. "Everything okay? That lady seems pretty harsh." Zoe tensed, unsure how to respond. Strangers sometimes noticed Lisa's behavior, but Zoe had learned that complaining only made things worse later. "She's just tired from traveling," she said finally, the excuse falling from her lips automatically. He nodded, clearly unconvinced. "I'm Alex, by the way, heading to Chicago for a campus visit." "Zoe? Visiting family?" She glanced nervously toward the bathroom, afraid Lisa would return and catch her talking to a stranger. "Cool sweatshirt," Alex said, nodding at her university logo. "That's where I'm hoping to go. Their engineering program is supposed to be amazing." "My aunt went there," Zoe replied, warming to the conversation despite her anxiety. "She said the same thing. She's been helping me research colleges." Alex grinned. "Maybe we'll be classmates someday." The thought made Zoe smile. College. Freedom. A life where she could make her own choices, far from Lisa's critical eye and cutting remarks. Just one more year of high school to endure. She spotted Lisa returning from the bathroom and quickly turned back to her book. Alex, sensing the change, put his earbud back in and turned to the window. As Lisa approached their row, Sophia appeared with her beverage cart, blocking the aisle. "Would anyone like a refill?" she asked cheerfully, looking directly at Lisa. Lisa's expression darkened. "I need to get to my seat." "Of course," Sophia replied with a professional smile. "Just give me one moment to serve these passengers, and I'll move the cart for you." Lisa's fingers drummed impatiently on her thigh as Sophia deliberately took her time serving drinks to the row in front of them. Zoe could see Lisa's frustration building with each passing second. When Sophia finally moved the cart to let Lisa pass, she said, "Would you like a refill on your coffee, ma'am?" "Fine," Lisa replied tersely. "And how about you, honey?" Sophia asked Zoe. "More apple juice?" "Yes, please," Zoe said, surprised by the attention. As Sophia prepared their drinks, Lisa leaned over to whisper harshly in Zoe's ear, "Stop trying to make friends with everyone. You're embarrassing me." Zoe bit her lip, focusing on the pattern of the seat in front of her. She hadn't done anything wrong, but in Lisa's world, Zoe was always somehow at fault. Sophia handed Lisa her coffee first, then carefully passed Zoe her apple juice. "There you go. We'll be starting our second service in about an hour, but if you need anything before then, just press the call button." As Sophia moved on, Lisa took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. "Too hot," she complained. "They never get it right." The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing the drinks to slosh in their cups. Zoe quickly steadied her apple juice, but Lisa seemed almost careless with her coffee, letting it come dangerously close to spilling. "Be careful," Zoe warned instinctively. Lisa's eyes flashed. "Don't tell me what to do. I've been holding drinks on planes since before you were born." The captain's voice came over the intercom, asking everyone to remain seated due to anticipated turbulence. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and Sophia and the other flight attendants began checking that passengers were secured. Lisa took another sip of her coffee, then set it on her tray table without putting the lid back on properly. With each small bump of turbulence, the dark liquid sloshed closer to the edge. Zoe watched anxiously, knowing that if the coffee spilled, Lisa would somehow blame her. She considered offering to fix the lid, but knew that would only irritate Lisa more. The turbulence increased slightly, and Lisa's coffee cup danced on the tray table. Zoe held her breath, waiting for the inevitable. When the plane suddenly dropped a few feet, several passengers gasped, and Lisa's coffee tipped over, spreading across her tray table. "Look what you did," Lisa hissed, though Zoe hadn't touched the cup. "I didn't," Zoe began, but Lisa cut her off. "Always causing problems," she muttered, using the small napkin to ineffectively dab at the spreading puddle. Some coffee dripped onto Lisa's pants, making her curse under her breath. Sophia appeared beside them as if by magic, holding a stack of napkins. "Let me help with that," she offered, her voice calm and professional. Lisa snatched the napkins from her. "We're fine." "It's no trouble," Sophia insisted, her eyes darting briefly to Zoe's face, noting her discomfort. "These things happen all the time during turbulence." As Lisa mopped up the coffee, her movements growing more agitated, Sophia leaned down slightly. "Everything okay here?" she asked quietly, her question seemingly directed at both of them, but her eyes fixed on Zoe. "We're fine," Lisa repeated firmly. Sophia nodded but didn't move away immediately. "If you need anything at all," she said, her gaze still on Zoe, "just press the call button." When Sophia finally left, Lisa turned to Zoe with narrowed eyes. "What was that about? Why was she looking at you like that?" Zoe shrugged, genuinely, confused by the flight attendant's special attention. "I don't know. You must have said something to her," Lisa accused, her voice low but intense. "What did you tell her about me?" "Nothing," Zoe insisted, fear creeping into her voice. "I haven't talked to her except to order my drink." Lisa didn't look convinced, but the turbulence had subsided, and the captain announced they could move. "About the cabin again." Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt. "I'm going to clean up in the bathroom. Stay here and don't talk to anyone." As Lisa stalked off toward the bathroom again, Alex removed his earbud. "You okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Zoe nodded automatically, the response ingrained from years of hiding her true feelings. "Fine." "You know," Alex said hesitantly, "my cousin was in a foster home like that before my aunt adopted him. The mom was nice to everyone except him." Zoe tensed. "Lisa's not like that. She's just particular." Alex didn't push it, but he reached into his bag and pulled out a small package of cookies. "Want one? They're my road trip tradition." The unexpected kindness made Zoe's eyes sting with unshed tears. She accepted a cookie with a grateful "somewhat," taking a small bite as if savoring not just the sweetness, but the simple act of friendship. Across the aisle, one of the children had fallen asleep on their mother's lap, while the father read quietly to the other child. The scene made Zoe's heart ache for what she had lost and what she had never found with Lisa. Sophia passed by again, pausing briefly to check on them. She noticed the cookies and smiled. "Those look good," she said, then added in a lower voice, "Everything still okay?" Zoe nodded, confused by the flight attendant's persistent concern. "Yes, thank you." Sophia held her gaze a moment longer than necessary, then moved on to check on other passengers. Zoe watched her go, wondering why this stranger seemed more worried about her welfare than the woman who had legally become her mother 3 years ago. Lisa returned from the bathroom, her pants still showing a faint coffee stain. She frowned when she saw the cookie in Zoe's hand. "What's that? Where did you get food?" Before Zoe could answer, Alex spoke up. "I offered her one of my cookies. Family tradition for flying." Lisa's eyes narrowed at Alex, then at the cookies. "She has food allergies. You shouldn't give her things without asking me first." This was a lie. Zoe had no food allergies, but Lisa often invented medical issues to control what Zoe ate or to create barriers between Zoe and others. "Sorry, I didn't know," Alex said, looking confused. Lisa sat down heavily in her seat and buckled her seatbelt with more force than necessary. "Put that away," she told Zoe. "You don't know what's in it." Reluctantly, Zoe wrapped the half-eaten cookie in a napkin and tucked it into the seat pocket. Alex shot her an apologetic look, clearly regretting that his kind gesture had caused more trouble. The rest of the hour passed in tense silence. Zoe returned to her book, but the words no longer provided the escape they had earlier. Lisa flipped through her magazine, sighing loudly every few minutes as if to remind Zoe of her displeasure. The captain announced they were about halfway to Chicago, and the flight attendants began preparing for the second beverage service. Zoe's stomach growled quietly. The small airline breakfast had been hours ago, and she hadn't been able to finish her cookie. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement, "we'll be coming through the cabin with our snack service shortly. Today, we're offering pretzels or cookies along with a beverage of your choice." Lisa leaned over to Zoe. "Don't ask for anything. We'll eat when we see Tom." Zoe nodded, used to going hungry when Lisa decided food wasn't necessary. Tom would have a fit if he knew how often Lisa forgot to provide meals when they were alone at home. But Zoe had stopped complaining long ago. It only made things worse. As the food cart approached their row, Sophia once again appeared, this time handling the service herself, rather than another flight attendant. "Pretzels or cookies?" she asked Lisa with a professional smile. "Nothing, for us," Lisa replied curtly. Sophia turned to Zoe directly. "Are you sure? The cookies are really good." Before Lisa could intervene, Zoe spoke up. "Actually, I am a little hungry." The look Lisa gave her could have frozen fire, but with Sophia watching, she couldn't object without seeming unreasonable. "Cookies for me, please," Zoe said, meeting Sophia's eyes. "Of course," Sophia replied, handing her a package. "And would you like a refill on your apple juice?" "Yes, please." Lisa's fingers dug into the armrest as Sophia poured Zoe a fresh cup of juice and handed it to her with a napkin. "And nothing for you, ma'am?" Sophia asked Lisa, her tone perfectly polite. "I said no," Lisa replied through gritted teeth. As Sophia moved on to Alex, offering him snacks as well, Lisa leaned close to Zoe. "You're pushing it," she whispered, her breath hot against Zoe's ear. "Just wait until we're alone." The threat hung in the air between them, but for once Zoe didn't feel the usual wave of fear. Something about being on this plane with kind strangers like Alex and Sophia nearby made her feel braver than usual. Tom was waiting in Chicago. 3 days of safety lay ahead. She opened her cookie package and took a deliberate bite, meeting Lisa's gaze steadily for the first time in months. The small act of defiance felt like a tiny crack in the wall of fear Lisa had built around her. Lisa's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in anger. She reached for her fresh cup of coffee, her fingers wrapping around it tightly. The plane hit another small patch of turbulence, and Zoe saw something change in Lisa's expression. A calculation, a decision. As the plane dipped slightly, Lisa's hand moved, and Zoe knew with sudden certainty what was about to happen. The moment balanced on a knife's edge as the coffee in Lisa's cup sloshed toward the rim, and Sophia, from her position a few rows ahead, turned back to look at them, as if some sixth sense had alerted her to the brewing storm. The airplane cabin hummed with the white noise of engines and quiet conversations. Zoe took small bites of her cookie, savoring each sweet morsel, aware of Lisa's eyes on her like daggers. The package crinkled in her hands as she carefully folded it, not wanting to make a mess or give Lisa another reason to be upset. "I told you not to eat that," Lisa whispered, her voice low enough that only Zoe could hear. "You never listen." Zoe swallowed her last bite and tucked the empty wrapper into the seat pocket. "I was hungry," she replied softly, surprising herself with this small act of defiance. Lisa's nostrils flared slightly, a warning sign Zoe had learned to recognize over the years. When Lisa got that look, it usually meant trouble was coming. The coffee cup in Lisa's hand trembled slightly, dark liquid sloshing against the sides. Alex, the young man by the window, had his eyes closed again, music playing through his earbuds, unaware of the tension building beside him. Across the aisle, one of the children had woken up from a nap and was now looking at a picture book with her father, pointing at the colorful illustrations and giggling. The plane hit another small pocket of turbulence, causing the overhead bins to creak. The seatbelt sign remained off, though, and the flight attendants continued their service, moving methodically down the aisle with their cart. Sophia was now several rows ahead, helping an elderly passenger with his tray table. She glanced back toward Zoe's row as if checking on them, before returning her attention to the older man. "That flight attendant keeps watching us," Lisa muttered, her knuckles whitening around her coffee cup. "What did you say to her?" "Nothing," Zoe insisted, her stomach tightening with familiar anxiety. "I didn't say anything." Lisa snorted in disbelief. "Right. Just like you didn't say anything to your teacher last month when she called to check if everything was okay at home." Zoe's heart sank. Mrs. Chen had indeed called after noticing bruises on Zoe's arms, bruises from when Lisa had grabbed her too hard during an argument. Zoe had made up a story about falling during volleyball practice, and Mrs. Chen had seemed to accept it, but Lisa had been furious about the call. "I didn't," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible over the plane's ambient noise. "Mrs. Chen was just being nice." "Nice," Lisa repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Everyone's always so nice to you, aren't they? Poor little orphan girl. Everyone feels so sorry for you. The words stung as they were meant to. Lisa knew exactly how to hurt Zoe, how to press on the wounds that had never fully healed after her parents' deaths. Zoe turned to look out the window, trying to see past Alex without disturbing him. Clouds stretched below them like a vast white carpet, beautiful and peaceful. She imagined walking on them, stepping from one fluffy mound to another, far away from Lisa and her cutting words. "Don't ignore me when I'm talking to you," Lisa hissed, shifting in her seat. The plane dipped suddenly, another patch of turbulence making several passengers gasp. Lisa's coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup, a few drops landing on her pants. "Now look what you made happen," she snapped, though Zoe hadn't moved or touched her. "I'm sorry," Zoe said automatically, reaching for a napkin to help. Lisa slapped her hand away, the sound making Alex stir beside them. "Don't touch me," she said, loud enough that a few nearby passengers glanced their way. Sophia appeared at the end of their row, as if summoned by the commotion. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her professional smile in place, but her eyes sharp and assessing. "Fine," Lisa replied curtly. "Just a little spill from the turbulence." Sophia nodded, offering a handful of napkins. "The captain says we might experience a bit more turbulence as we approach a weather system. Please keep your seatbelts fastened when seated." Lisa took the napkins without a word of thanks and began dabbing at her pants. Sophia hesitated, her gaze moving to Zoe. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, the question directed at both of them but her eyes lingering on Zoe. "We're fine," Lisa answered before Zoe could speak. Sophia nodded again, but instead of moving on, she leaned down slightly. "Actually, I noticed we have some seats available in the front row if either of you would prefer more legroom. Sometimes it helps with turbulence too." Lisa's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "We're fine right where we are." "Actually," Zoe began, the thought of even a short break from Lisa's hostility suddenly appealing. "I wouldn't mind." "We're staying together," Lisa cut in, her tone final. "She's my daughter. She stays with me." Something in the way Lisa emphasized, "my daughter," made Sophia's expression change slightly, a brief flicker of concern crossing her features before her professional mask returned. "Of course," Sophia said smoothly. "Just let me know if you change your mind." She moved away, continuing down the aisle, but Zoe noticed how she glanced back once, her brow furrowed. "What was that about?" Lisa demanded as soon as Sophia was out of earshot. "Were you trying to get away from me?" "No," Zoe lied, her heart racing. "I just thought it might be nice to have more legroom." Lisa snorted. "Right. More legroom. Or maybe you just wanted to tell her more lies about me." "I haven't told her anything," Zoe insisted, feeling the familiar helplessness washing over her. No matter what she said, Lisa wouldn't believe her. The seatbelt sign dinged on and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some moderate turbulence for the next 15 minutes or so. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin." Sophia and the other flight attendants moved quickly, checking that tray tables were up and seatbelts were fastened. When Sophia reached their row again, she paused. "Can I take that empty cup for you?" she asked Lisa, gesturing to the coffee cup still in her hand. Lisa clutched it tighter. "I'm not finished." Sophia's eyes flickered to the cup, which was clearly almost empty, then back to Lisa's face. "I understand. But with the turbulence coming, it might be safer if I said I'm not finished," Lisa repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Sophia nodded, her professional smile never wavering. "Of course, just be careful with hot beverages during turbulence." Her gaze moved to Zoe again, a silent question in her eyes that Zoe couldn't quite interpret. As Sophia moved on, Lisa turned to Zoe with a scowl. "She thinks she knows better than me. They all do. The teachers, the counselors, and now some flight attendant." Zoe said nothing, knowing from experience that there was no right response when Lisa got like this. She rechecked her seatbelt instead, making sure it was secure. As the plane began to bounce slightly, the turbulence increased, the plane shuddering as it passed through rough air. Overhead bins rattled, and the drink cart at the front of the cabin was quickly secured by the flight attendants. A few nervous passengers gripped their armrests, while others continued reading or watching movies on their screens, unbothered by the bumpy ride. Lisa held her coffee cup tightly, the remaining liquid sloshing with each jolt of the plane. Zoe kept her eyes forward, trying to focus on the back of the seat in front of her, counting down the minutes until they would land in Chicago. Until she would see Tom. Until she would have 3 days of respite from Lisa's constant criticism and coldness. The plane dropped suddenly, causing several passengers to gasp. Zoe's stomach lurched with the descent and she gripped her armrest. Beside her, Lisa seemed almost pleased by the rough air, a strange gleam in her eyes as she watched Zoe's discomfort. "Scared?" Lisa asked, a hint of mockery in her voice. "Your real mom was afraid of flying too. Never wanted to get on a plane. Maybe if she had stayed on the ground, she'd still be alive." The casual cruelty of the comment stole Zoe's breath. Her parents had died in a car accident, not a plane crash, but Lisa often twisted facts to cause maximum pain. The plane lurched again and Lisa's coffee splashed over the rim of her cup, this time landing on Zoe's sweatshirt, her favorite sweatshirt, the one from her aunt's university. "Oh, look at that," Lisa said, not sounding sorry at all. "What a shame." Zoe grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the stain, trying to keep her emotions in check. It was just coffee. It would wash out. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you. "Upset?" "It's fine," Zoe said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "No big deal." Lisa's eyes narrowed at Zoe's lack of reaction. She seemed almost disappointed that her barb hadn't drawn blood, that the coffee spill hadn't provoked tears. The plane stabilized briefly, the worst of the turbulence apparently behind them, though the seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Lisa swirled the remaining coffee in her cup, looking at it thoughtfully. "You know," she said, her voice conversational but with an undercurrent of menace. "Tom called me last night after you went to bed." Zoe looked up surprised. "He did?" "Mm-hmm," Lisa nodded, still staring at her coffee. "He was thinking maybe this visit isn't such a good idea after all." Zoe's heart sank. "What? Why would he say that?" Lisa shrugged. "He's very busy with work. Said he might not have much time for us. For you." The lie was obvious. Tom had just texted about the cookies he'd bought for her, about setting up the guest room, but doubt still crept into Zoe's mind. What if he had changed his mind? What if Lisa had said something to him, turned him against her somehow? "But he just texted me," Zoe said, her voice small. "He said he was excited to see us." "Well, that was before," Lisa replied vaguely. "Things change?" "Before what?" Zoe pressed, unusual boldness rising in her. "What did you tell him?" Lisa's eyes flashed with anger at being questioned. "Don't use that tone with me, I'm just telling you what he said." Alex stirred beside them, removing one earbud. He'd clearly caught the edge of their conversation. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking between them with concern. "Fine," Lisa snapped. "Private family conversation." Alex hesitated, his eyes meeting Zoe's briefly before he nodded and replaced his earbud, though Zoe noticed he didn't turn his music back on. He was listening, watching from the corner of his eye. The plane jolted again, a final burst of turbulence that caught everyone by surprise. Lisa's hand jerked, and coffee splashed onto Zoe's lap, soaking through her jeans. "Oh!" Zoe gasped, more from shock than pain, though the liquid was still warm. "Don't be so dramatic," Lisa said loudly. "It's barely even hot anymore." Sophia appeared beside them instantly, as if she'd been watching and waiting for an opportunity to intervene. "Is everything all right? I saw the spill." "Just an accident," Lisa said dismissively, "the turbulence." Sophia looked at the coffee staining Zoe's jeans, then at the cup in Lisa's hand, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Let me get you some more napkins and some club soda for the stain," she said, her voice neutral, but her gaze sharp. As Sophia turned to retrieve the supplies, the plane hit one final patch of rough air. Lisa's hand moved suddenly, deliberately tipping the rest of her coffee directly onto Zoe's chest and lap. "Oops," Lisa said, not even pretending it was an accident this time. "So clumsy of me." Zoe gasped as the liquid soaked through her clothes. It wasn't hot enough to burn, but the shock of the deliberate action done so openly left her speechless. Alex sat up straight, removing both earbuds now. "Hey, that wasn't an accident," he said, his voice carrying across the nearby rows. "I saw you do that on purpose." Other passengers turned to look, drawn by Alex's words and Zoe's obvious distress. The family across the aisle stared, the mother covering her child's eyes as if to shield her from witnessing such cruelty. "Mind your own business," Lisa hissed at Alex. But the damage was done. People had seen. Witnesses. Sophia returned with napkins and club soda, taking in the scene with one quick glance. Zoe now completely soaked with coffee, Lisa's empty cup still tilted in her hand, and the shocked expressions of nearby passengers. "What happened?" Sophia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "More turbulence," Lisa replied, avoiding eye contact. "These things happen." "No, they don't," Alex cut in. She poured it on her deliberately. "I watched her do it." Murmurs spread through the nearby rows as other passengers confirmed they had seen it too. Lisa's face reddened, not with shame but with anger at being exposed. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she snapped at Alex, then turned to Sophia. "And you can mind your own business too. She's my daughter, and I'll handle this." Sophia's professional demeanor didn't slip, but her eyes hardened. "Ma'am, I'd like you to come with me to the galley for a moment, please." "I'm not going anywhere," Lisa replied, crossing her arms. "Ma'am," Sophia repeated, her voice firmer now, "this isn't a request. Please come with me now." The authority in her tone seemed to surprise Lisa, who was used to intimidating others not being intimidated herself. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, her movements deliberate, as if to show she was choosing to comply rather than being forced. As Lisa stood, Sophia turned to Zoe. "Honey, would you like to come too? We can get you cleaned up." Zoe nodded, relief washing over her at the chance to escape Lisa, even if just for a few minutes. She unbuckled her seatbelt with shaking hands and stood, coffee dripping from her clothes. "She stays here," Lisa said sharply. "Whatever you have to say to me, you can say it in front of her." Sophia's gaze never wavered. "Actually, ma'am, I think it would be better if we spoke privately. My colleague will help your daughter get cleaned up." As if on cue, another flight attendant appeared, a kind-faced woman with gray streaks in her dark hair. "Come with me, sweetheart," she said to Zoe. "Let's get you some dry clothes. We keep spare t-shirts for situations like this." Lisa started to object again, but Sophia cut her off with a gesture. "This way, please, ma'am," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As Lisa reluctantly followed Sophia toward the front of the plane, the other flight attendant guided Zoe toward the rear galley. Zoe could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, some curious, some concerned, some pitying. The shame of it burned almost as much as Lisa's cruelty. "I'm Diane," the older flight attendant said as they reached the small galley space at the back of the plane. "Let's get you cleaned up." That couldn't have been pleasant. Zoe nodded mutely, still processing what had happened. For years, Lisa had been careful to keep her cruelty private, to maintain the appearance of a loving mother in public. This open display of hostility was new and frightening. What would happen when they were alone again? "Here we go," Diane said, pulling a plain blue t-shirt from a storage compartment. "It's airline issue, so nothing fancy, but it's clean and dry. The bathroom's right there if you want to change." Zoe took the shirt gratefully. "Thank you." "Take your time, honey," Diane said, her eyes kind but knowing. "And when you come out, maybe we can have a little chat." In the tiny airplane bathroom, Zoe peeled off her coffee-soaked sweatshirt, her fingers tracing the university logo before she reluctantly set it aside. The blue t-shirt was several sizes too big but soft and clean. She splashed water on her face, trying to compose herself. When she emerged, Diane was waiting with a plastic bag for her wet clothes and a cup of apple juice. "Here you go," she said, gesturing to a small fold-down seat in the galley. "Have a seat for a minute before you go back." Zoe sat, accepting the juice with a small, "Thank you." She sipped it slowly, the sweet liquid washing away the bitter taste in her mouth. "Has this happened before?" Diane asked gently, her eyes searching Zoe's face. Zoe hesitated, years of conditioning making her reluctant to speak ill of Lisa to strangers. "The coffee spill. The way she treats you," Diane clarified, her voice kind but direct. "The purposeful accidents, the way she speaks to you." Zoe looked down at her juice, unsure how to respond. The truth felt dangerous to speak aloud, but the lie stuck in her throat. "It's okay," Diane continued when Zoe didn't answer. "You don't have to say anything you're not comfortable with, but I want you to know that what happened out there, that's not okay. That's not how a parent should treat their child." Tears welled, in Zoe's eyes unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back fiercely, unwilling to cry in front of this stranger no matter how kind she seemed. "Sophia noticed something was off as soon as you boarded," Diane explained. "We're trained to look for certain behaviors, certain dynamics. And then several passengers have mentioned concerns during the flight." Zoe's head snapped up. "They have?" Diane nodded. "The young man in your row, the couple behind you. They've all expressed concerns about how she was speaking to you, even before the coffee incident. The idea that strangers had noticed, had cared, enough to say something was both comforting and mortifying. For so long, Zoe had believed that no one could see what happened behind closed doors, that no one would believe her if she spoke up. "What happens now?" Zoe asked, her voice small but steady. Diane's expression turned serious. "Well, that depends partly on you. Sophia is speaking with Lisa now, and the captain has been informed of the situation." The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Diane had started to say, "your mother," but had stopped herself as if sensing that the relationship was more complicated than legal labels suggested. "There are procedures we follow in cases like this," Diane continued carefully. "But it would help if you could tell us a bit more. Is there someone waiting for you in Chicago? Someone you trust?" "My adoptive father," Zoe said immediately. "Tom. He's waiting for us at the airport. He doesn't know what Lisa is like when he's not around. She's different when he's there." Diane nodded, making a mental note. "And do you feel safe going home with Lisa after this trip?" The question cut to the heart of Zoe's fears. Did she feel safe? No, not really. But what was the alternative? Foster care. Again? Being separated from Tom, the one person who had shown her consistent kindness since her parents died? Before Zoe could formulate an answer, Sophia appeared at the galley entrance, her expression serious but calm. "How are you doing?" she asked Zoe. "Better," Zoe replied, gesturing to the clean shirt. "Thank you." Sophia exchanged a glance with Diane, some unspoken communication passing between them. "I've had a chat with Lisa," she said carefully. "And I've also spoken with the captain. We're about 40 minutes from landing in Chicago." Zoe nodded, waiting for her to continue. "There will be some people meeting us at the gate," Sophia explained gently. "They'll want to talk to both you and Lisa separately, and we've arranged for someone to contact Tom to meet you there as well." Realization dawned on Zoe. "You mean like police?" "Airport security and a social worker," Sophia clarified. "What happened today raised some serious concerns about your well-being. We have a responsibility to report incidents like this." A mix of emotions washed over Zoe. Fear, relief, anxiety, hope. For years, she had endured Lisa's treatment in silence, believing there was no way out, no one who would believe her over an adult. And now, because of one cup of coffee and the watchful eyes of strangers, everything might change. "What will happen to Lisa?" she asked, not sure if she was concerned for her adoptive mother or for herself. Sophia shook her head. "I can't say for certain. That will be up to the authorities and ultimately to you. But for now, We need to get you back to your seat for landing. Would you prefer to sit somewhere else? We can arrange that." Zoe considered the offer, tempted by the prospect of spending the rest of the flight away from Lisa's glares and whispered threats. But a new resolve was forming within her, a courage born from the knowledge that she was no longer alone in this. "No," she said finally, straightening her shoulders. "I'll go back to my seat." Sophia studied her face, concern evident in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Zoe nodded. "I'm sure. I can handle 40 more minutes." Something like respect flickered across Sophia's features. "All right then, I'll walk you back." As they made their way down the aisle, Zoe could feel the eyes of other passengers on her again. But this time, the gazes felt supportive rather than pitying. She was no longer just a victim in their eyes, but a person standing up for herself. Lisa was already back in her seat, staring straight ahead, her posture rigid with suppressed anger. As Zoe approached, their eyes met briefly. And for the first time, Zoe saw something new in Lisa's gaze. Fear. The balance of power had shifted, and they both knew it. Whatever happened when they landed in Chicago, things would never go back to the way they were before. For better or worse, everything had changed with one cup of coffee and the courage of a flight attendant who refused to look the other way. The cabin hummed with quiet conversations and the steady drone of engines. As Sophia walked Zoe back to her seat, other passengers glanced up as they passed, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. The blue airline t-shirt hung loosely on Zoe's frame, a visible reminder of what had happened. Lisa sat stiffly in her aisle seat, staring straight ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. When Zoe approached, Lisa didn't turn to look at her, acting as if her adopted daughter was a stranger. "Excuse me," Zoe said quietly, waiting for Lisa to move her legs so she could reach her middle seat. Lisa shifted slightly, barely creating enough space for Zoe to squeeze past. As Zoe settled into her seat, she could feel the chill radiating from Lisa, an icy anger that was somehow more frightening than her usual sharp words. "Everything okay here?" Sophia asked, her question directed at Zoe rather than Lisa. Zoe nodded, not trusting her voice. The simple act of sitting next to Lisa again made her stomach tighten with anxiety, but she was determined to get through the remaining 40 minutes of the flight. "I'll be right up front if you need anything," Sophia said, her gaze meaningful. "Anything at all?" As Sophia walked away, Lisa finally turned to Zoe, her voice a harsh whisper. "Happy now? Got everyone on your side, don't you?" Zoe kept her eyes forward, focusing on the seat in front of her. "I didn't do anything." "Right?" Lisa scoffed. "You never do anything. Things just happen around you, and somehow it's always my fault." Alex, the young man by the window, was watching them openly now, no longer pretending to be absorbed in his music. His presence felt like a shield, a witness that might keep Lisa's behavior in check. "I saw what happened," he said quietly but firmly. "Everyone saw." Lisa's head snapped toward him. "Mind your own business. You have no idea what goes on in our family." "I know what I saw," Alex replied, unflinching under her glare. "And I told that flight attendant exactly what I saw." The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and flight attendants began moving through the cabin, checking that tray tables were up and seatbelts were fastened. Lisa turned back to face forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. "Tom will never believe any of this," she said, her voice low and threatening. "It's your word against mine, and he knows how you make things up." Zoe's heart sank at the mention of Tom. What would he think when he heard about all this? Would he believe her? Or would Lisa twist the story, as she always did, making Zoe sound unstable or attention-seeking? The plane began its descent, the change in pressure making Zoe's ears pop. She swallowed hard, trying to relieve the discomfort. Outside the window beyond Alex's shoulder, she could see the sprawling city of Chicago coming into view, the early afternoon sun reflecting off the windows of skyscrapers. Tom was down there somewhere waiting for them at the airport, unaware of the drama that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. Would he be angry? Disappointed? Would he take Lisa's side as he sometimes did when it was easier than questioning his wife? Sophia appeared again, checking their row. Seatbelts fastened? Tray tables up? Her eyes linger. Ed on Zoe, a silent question in them. Zoe nodded slightly, indicating she was okay. Lisa remained motionless, refusing to acknowledge Sophia's presence. "We'll be on the ground in about 20 minutes, Sophia said, her voice professional but with an undercurrent of warmth directed at Zoe. "Weather's nice in Chicago today." As Sophia moved on to the next row, Lisa exhaled sharply through her nose. "She acts like I'm not even here." "You weren't answering her," Zoe pointed out quietly. "Don't get smart with me," Lisa snapped. "You've caused enough trouble for one day." The elderly couple seated behind them cleared their throats loudly, a clear sign they had heard Lisa's comment. Lisa stiffened, suddenly aware of the eyes and ears around them, the witnesses to her behavior that she could no longer ignore. The plane continued its descent, the ground growing closer through the window. Zoe felt a strange mix of dread and hope as they approached Chicago. Whatever happened when they landed, things would never be the same between her and Lisa. The careful facade Lisa had maintained in public had cracked wide open, exposing the truth of their relationship for all to see. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach into Chicago O'Hare," the captain announced. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing." Sophia and the other flight attendants moved quickly through the cabin, checking one last time that everything was secure. When Sophia reached their row, she paused. "We'll be landing in about 10 minutes, she said to Zoe. "Remember what I told you about the people meeting us at the gate?" Lisa's head whipped toward Sophia. "What people? What are you talking about?" Sophia met Lisa's gaze directly, her expression professional but unyielding. "As I explained to you earlier, ma'am, we've reported the incident that occurred on this flight. There will be airport security and a social worker meeting us when we land." The color drained from Lisa's face. "This is ridiculous. It was an accident. You can't just call in authorities over spilled coffee." "It wasn't just spilled coffee, ma'am," Sophia replied evenly. "Multiple passengers witnessed you deliberately pour coffee on your daughter, and we've had concerns about your behavior toward her throughout the flight." Lisa's expression hardened. "She's not even my real daughter. She's adopted. And she's been nothing but trouble since the day we took her in." The words hung in the air, shocking in their casual cruelty. Zoe felt them like a physical blow, though they merely confirmed what she had always suspected Lisa felt about her. Alex inhaled sharply beside her, and the couple behind them murmured in disbelief. Sophia's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of anger before she composed herself. "Ma'am," Sophia said, her voice steady but cold, "I'm going to have to ask you to keep such comments to yourself for the remainder of the flight." "You can't tell me what to say to my own child," Lisa retorted. "Actually, I can," Sophia replied. "As a flight attendant, I'm responsible for the safety and well-being of all passengers on this aircraft. That includes protecting minors from verbal abuse." The word abuse seemed to echo in the small space around them. Zoe had never thought of Lisa's behavior in those terms before, had never allowed herself to label it as abuse. But hearing it spoken aloud in front of witnesses made something click into place in her mind. This wasn't normal. This wasn't her fault. This wasn't something she deserved. Lisa fell silent, her face flushed with anger but her lips pressed firmly together. Sophia gave Zoe a reassuring nod before moving on to complete her landing checks. The plane descended through a layer of clouds, the cabin lights brightening to compensate for the sudden dimness outside the windows. Zoe could feel the wheels lowering, the mechanical whir and thunk as the landing gear locked into place. "I hope you're satisfied," Lisa muttered, her voice barely audible over the increased engine noise. "Turning everyone against me. Making me look like the bad guy." Zoe said nothing, knowing any response would only fuel Lisa's anger. Instead, she focused on the thought of seeing Tom soon, of having someone in her corner who might actually listen to her side of the story. The plane broke through the cloud layer, the sprawling landscape of Chicago now clearly visible below. They were so close to landing, so close to whatever awaited them at the gate. "You know what?" Lisa continued, her voice low and venomous. "Maybe this is for the best. Maybe Tom and I are better off without you. Did you ever think of that? How much easier our lives would be?" The words were meant to hurt, to make Zoe doubt herself, to make her afraid of losing the only family she had left. But strangely, they had the opposite effect. If Lisa truly felt that way, then maybe Zoe would be better off without her too. "Maybe, you're right," Zoe replied softly, surprising herself with the calmness in her voice. Lisa blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Before she could reply, the plane touched down with a slight bump, tires screeching against the runway as they connected with solid ground. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare International Airport," the captain announced as they taxied toward the terminal. "Local time is 2:15 p.m. and the temperature is a pleasant 72 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." The familiar announcements continued, but Zoe barely heard them. Her mind was racing ahead to what would happen next. Would the social worker believe her? Would Tom stand up for her against Lisa? Was there any chance of fixing their broken family? Or was this the beginning of the end? As the plane approached the gate, slowing to a crawl, Sophia appeared at the front of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please remain seated when we reach the gate. We'll be allowing a few passengers to deplane first before general deplaning begins. Thank you for your patience and understanding." Lisa stiffened beside Zoe, understanding that they would be among those few passengers who would be escorted off first. "This is humiliating," she hissed. "They're treating us like criminals." "They're treating you like someone who hurt their child in public," Alex said quietly from the window seat. "There's a difference." Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but the plane came to a full stop at that moment, the engines powering down with a fading whine. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated as Sophia made her way down the aisle toward them. "Ms. Williams," Sophia said to Lisa, her tone formal but not unkind. "If you and Zoe could please gather your belongings and come with me." Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt with jerky movements, her face a mask of barely contained rage. Zoe followed suit, reaching under the seat for her backpack. Alex leaned toward Zoe as she prepared to stand. "Good luck," he whispered. "Stay strong." The simple encouragement from a stranger who had witnessed her humiliation but chosen to support her rather than judge her brought unexpected tears to Zoe's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, nodding her thanks to Alex. As they made their way to the front of the plane, Zoe could feel the eyes of other passengers on them. Some looked away awkwardly, others watched with open curiosity, and a few offered small smiles of encouragement as she passed. Diane, the older flight attendant who had helped Zoe clean up, stood by the door with a kind expression. "Your father has been contacted," she told Zoe quietly. "He's waiting with the others." Relief washed over Zoe at the news that Tom was already there. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't have to face it alone with Lisa. The jetway stretched before them as they exited the plane, the short tunnel leading to whatever awaited them in the terminal. Sophia walked ahead while Diane fell in behind them, creating a sort of escort that prevented Lisa from saying anything further to Zoe. At the end of the jetway, a small group waited. 2 airport security officers in uniform, a woman in business, casual attire with a clipboard who Zoe assumed was the social worker, and her heart leapt, Tom. Her adoptive father's familiar face was creased with worry, his eyes searching for her as they approached. When he spotted her, relief flooded his expression, followed quickly by confusion as he took in the oversized blue t-shirt she now wore instead of her university sweatshirt. "Zoe? Lisa? What's going on?" Tom asked, stepping forward to meet them. Lisa rushed toward him, her demeanor changing instantly from barely contained rage to distressed victim. "Oh, Tom, thank goodness you're here. This has been a nightmare. They're treating me like I've done something terrible over a simple accident." Before Tom could respond, Sophia spoke up. "Sir, are you Tom Williams?" Tom nodded, his eyes moving between his wife and Zoe, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. "Yes, that's me. Can someone please explain what's happening?" The woman with the clipboard stepped forward. Mr. Williams, I'm Vanessa Cooper from Child Protective Services. We've received a report of a concerning incident involving your wife and daughter on their flight today. Tom's brow furrowed as he looked at Zoe again, noting the airline t-shirt. What kind of incident? Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere, more private, Vanessa suggested, gesturing toward a nearby conference room. The airline has provided us with a space where we can talk. Tom nodded, still looking bewildered. Of course, as they moved toward the conference room, Lisa tried to position herself between Tom and Zoe, but Tom deliberately stepped around her, placing a gentle hand on Zoe's shoulder. Are you okay? He asked quietly, his concern evident. The simple question, asked with genuine care, nearly broke Zoe's composure. When W. As the last time Lisa had asked if she was okay and actually wanted to know the answer, I'm better now, Zoe replied honestly. The conference room was small but private, with a table and several chairs. One of the security officers remained outside, while the other came in with them. Sophia and Vanessa entered as well, while Diane returned to the plane to assist with the rest of the deplaning process. Please have a seat, Vanessa said, gesturing to the chairs around the table. Tom guided Zoe to a chair and sat beside her, while Lisa took a seat on Tom's other side, as far from Zoe as possible while still being next to her husband. Sophia and the security officer remained standing, positioning themselves near the door. Mr. Williams, Vanessa began, I want to be clear about why we're here. The flight crew and multiple passengers reported that your wife deliberately poured coffee on your daughter during the flight. There are also reports of verbal abuse and concerning behavior throughout the journey. Tom's expression shifted from confusion to shock. What? Lisa, what is she talking about? Lisa shook her head emphatically. It's being blown completely out of proportion. Yes, I spilled some coffee, but it was an accident. The plane hit turbulence. These flight attendants have been against me from the start, and they've turned Zoe against me, too. Sophia stepped forward. Sir, I was the lead flight attendant on this flight. What we observed was not an accident. Your wife deliberately poured her coffee onto Zoe after making several concerning comments that were overheard by other passengers. When I tried to help, she became confrontational and made additional troubling statements. What kind of statements? Tom asked, his voice tight. She referred to Zoe as not her real daughter and said she had been nothing but trouble since the day we took her in, Sophia replied, keeping her tone professional despite the harshness of the words. This was said loudly enough that multiple passengers heard it. Tom turned to Lisa, disbelief written across his face. Lisa, is this true? She's twisting my words, Lisa protested, reaching for Tom's hand. You know how Zoe can be. She's always so sensitive, always making everything into a bigger deal than it is. Actually, Vanessa interjected, we have written statements from 3 passengers who witnessed the incident, all describing the same deliberate action, and the young man seated in your row was quite clear that it was not an accident. Tom turned. To Zoe, his expression pained. Zoe, what happened? Please tell me the truth. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Zoe. This was the moment she had both dreaded and longed for, the chance to finally tell Tom what life with Lisa was really like when he wasn't around. The fear of not being believed, of making things worse, had kept her silent for so long. But now, with witnesses and evidence and people who seemed determined to protect her, maybe the truth could finally come out. Zoe took a deep breath, steadying herself. She did pour the coffee on me on purpose, she began, her voice quiet but clear. And it wasn't the first time she's done something like that. She's lying, Lisa interrupted sharply. Tom, you know how she exaggerates. Please let her finish, Vanessa said firmly to Lisa before turning back to Zoe. Go on, Zoe. Zoe looked directly at Tom, finding courage in his concerned gaze. When you're not home, Lisa is different. She says mean things, calls me names, tells me I'm a burden. Sometimes she forgets to make dinner for me or takes away things that are important to me as punishment for tiny mistakes. Tom's face paled as Zoe continued, her words coming faster now that the dam had broken. Today on the plane, she got mad because I was hungry and accepted a cookie from the flight attendant After she told me not to eat anything. She said we'd eat when we saw you, but she always says that, and sometimes we don't eat at all. That's ridiculous, Lisa scoffed. She's never missed a meal in her life. Mrs. Williams, please, Vanessa said sharply. Let Zoe speak. Zoe continued, her voice growing stronger. After I ate the cookie, she got really angry. When the plane hit turbulence, she spilled some coffee on me, but then she did it again on purpose. A lot more, all over my favorite sweatshirt, the one from Aunt Jenny's. University. Tom's eyes widened at the mention of the sweatshirt. He knew how much it meant to Zoe, how it connected her to her birth family. That's why I'm wearing this, Zoe explained, plucking at the blue airline t-shirt. My clothes were soaked with coffee. She also made some concerning comments about Zoe not being her real daughter and being better. 3 months had passed since that fateful flight to Chicago. Zoe stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her new button-down shirt. The morning sun streamed through her window, casting a warm glow over the space that had become truly hers. After the incident on the plane, everything had changed. Tom had extended his stay in Chicago, canceling meetings and rearranging his schedule to remain with Zoe. They had spent those first few days in a hotel, far from Lisa, while Tom made calls to lawyers and child protective services trying to understand their options. Lisa had returned to their home in Boston without them, furious and threatening legal action. But her threats had faded when faced with the reality of multiple witness statements from the flight and Zoe's willingness, at last, to speak about the years of emotional abuse she had endured. Now, Zoe and Tom lived in a small but comfortable apartment in Chicago. Tom had requested a permanent transfer to his company's Chicago office, sacrificing a promotion to stay in the city. Some things are more important than career advancement, he had told Zoe when she expressed guilt over his decision, like making sure you're safe and happy. A knock at her bedroom door pulled Zoe from her thoughts. Come in, she called, turning from the mirror. Tom poked his head in, a smile warming his face. Ready for the big day? Zoe nodded, smoothing her shirt one last time. As ready as I'll ever be. Today was important, her first meeting with the judge who would make the final decision about her future. The temporary custody arrangement that had allowed her to stay with Tom while separated from Lisa was coming to an end, and today, they would find out if it could become permanent. You look great, Tom assured her, stepping into the room. He had, dressed up too, wearing a tie and sports jacket instead of his usual casual work clothes. Breakfast is ready whenever you are. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast. Sounds perfect, Zoe replied, grabbing her backpack. Inside was a journal her therapist had suggested she keep, documenting her feelings as she navigated this challenging time. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, charting her journey from fear to cautious hope. In the kitchen, 2 plates waited on the small table by the window. Tom had made scrambled eggs with cheese, just the way she liked them, and whole wheat toast with the strawberry jam they had discovered at a farmer's market a few weeks ago. As they ate, Tom reviewed what they could expect at the hearing. Ms. Cooper will be there. You remember her from the airport? She'll present her report to the judge. Our lawyer says it's very favorable toward our situation. Zoe nodded, taking a bite of toast. Vanessa Cooper had become a regular presence in their lives over the past months, conducting home visits and interviews, observing their interactions, and evaluating whether Tom could provide a safe, nurturing environment for Zoe on his own. And Lisa? Zoe asked quietly, the name still difficult to say without a knot forming in her stomach. Tom's expression grew serious. She'll be there with her lawyer. You know she's contesting the arrangement, claiming she's completed anger management and parenting classes and deserves another chance. It was true. After the initial shock had worn off, Lisa had begun a campaign to repair her image, attending therapy and parenting classes, joining support groups for adoptive parents, and telling anyone who would listen that she had made mistakes but had changed. Do you think the judge will believe her? Zoe asked, setting down her fork. Tom reached across the table and squeezed her hand. The judge will consider everything, including your wishes. You're 16 now. Your voice matters in this decision, and you have a lot of people in your corner. He was right about that. Beyond Tom and Vanessa Cooper, Zoe had found unexpected allies. Alex, the young man from the plane, had stayed in touch after providing his witness statement, occasionally sending encouraging texts as he began. His freshman year at the university, Zoe hoped to attend someday. Her new therapist, Dr. Reynolds, had helped her understand that Lisa's behavior wasn't her fault, and had written a strong letter of support for the hearing. And then there was Sophia. The flight attendant who had refused to look the other way had kept in touch, first through official channels as part of the investigation, and later as a friend and mentor. She had even visited them in Chicago when her flight schedule allowed, bringing Zoe a proper replacement for her coffee-stained university sweatshirt and offering Tom advice on raising a teenage girl on his own. Sophia's flight gets in at noon, Tom reminded her, checking his watch. If the hearing goes as scheduled, she should be able to meet us afterward. Zoe smiled at the thought. Sophia had rearranged her flight schedule to be in Chicago for the hearing, a gesture that touched Zoe deeply. I hope we have good news to share with her. They finished breakfast and cleaned up together, a comfortable routine they had established in their new life. As Tom loaded the dishwasher, Zoe's phone buzzed with a text message from her best friend at her new school, wishing her luck for the day. That was another positive change. A new school where no one knew her as the troubled adopted kid or Lisa Williams' difficult daughter. Here she was just Zoe, a bright student with a talent for creative writing and a quiet sense of humor that had slowly emerged as she felt safer and more accepted. The drive to the courthouse took 20 minutes, the city traffic lighter than usual for a Thursday morning. Tom parked in the public garage across the street, and they walked together toward the imposing building, its stone facade gleaming in the morning sun. Nervous? Tom asked as they climbed the steps. A little, Zoe admitted. Mostly about seeing Lisa again. Tom nodded understandingly. Just remember, she can't hurt you anymore. Not physically, not emotionally. You have the power now. Inside, they met their lawyer, Ms. Patel, a kind but formidable woman who had taken their case pro bono after hearing about what happened on the flight. She briefed them quickly on last-minute details before leading them to the courtroom where their hearing would take place. Lisa was already there, sitting with her lawyer on the opposite side of the room. She looked thinner than Zoe remembered, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a severe bun. When she saw Zoe, she attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Zoe looked away quickly, focusing on Vanessa Cooper, who sat near the front, reviewing notes in a thick folder. The social worker looked up as they entered and gave Zoe an encouraging nod. All rise, the bailiff called as the judge entered, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and kind but serious eyes. The proceedings began with formalities, case numbers, and legal terms that washed over Zoe like white noise. She focused on her breathing, the way Dr. Reynolds had taught her, centering herself in the present moment rather than worrying about the outcome. Vanessa was called first, presenting her report on the home visits and interviews she had conducted over the past 3 months. Her voice was clear and professional as she outlined her findings. In my professional opinion, she concluded, Zoe has thrived in her current living arrangement with her adoptive father. She has established healthy routines, is performing well academically at her new school, and has formed appropriate peer relationships. Most importantly, she reports feeling safe and supported for the first time since her adoption 3 years ago. Lisa's lawyer cross-examined Vanessa, trying to suggest that the incident on the plane had been isolated and blown out of proportion, that Lisa had made significant progress in therapy, and that separating a child from her mother was a drastic step. Ms. Cooper, the lawyer asked, wouldn't you agree that most families have conflicts, that parents sometimes say things they regret in moments of stress? Vanessa remained composed. Of course, all families experience conflict. However, what was observed on that flight, and what Zoe has subsequently reported, goes well beyond normal family disagreements. It constitutes a pattern of emotional abuse that has had significant negative impacts on Zoe's well-being. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she presented a carefully crafted image of remorse and growth. She spoke about the challenges of adopting an older child, the stress of trying to connect with a teenager who had already experienced significant trauma, and her own unrecognized need for support and guidance. "I made mistakes," she admitted, her voice catching in what seemed like practiced emotion. "I said and did things I deeply regret, but I've worked hard these past 3 months. Therapy twice a week, parenting classes, support groups. I've learned how to be the mother Zoe deserves." Zoe kept her eyes down during Lisa's testimony, unable to look at the woman who had made her life miserable for 3 years. The words sounded right, but something in Lisa's tone felt off, the same false sincerity she had always used when Tom was around to witness their interactions. Tom testified next, speaking honestly about his failure to recognize what was happening in his own home. "I was blind," he said simply. "I traveled frequently for work, and when I was home, Lisa presented a completely different dynamic with Zoe. I should have seen the signs, asked more questions, been more present. That's my biggest regret, and it's something I've worked to correct these past 3 months." He described their new life in Chicago, the routines they had established, the therapy they both attended, individually and together, the way Zoe had slowly begun to trust that she was truly safe with him. "I'm not a perfect parent," he admitted. "I'm learning every day, but my priority is Zoe's well-being, her safety, her happiness, her future. Everything else, including my marriage, is secondary to that." Finally, it was Zoe's turn. She had been dreading this moment, speaking in front of the judge, in front of Lisa. But as she took the stand, a strange calm settled over her. This was her chance to speak her truth after years of silence. "Zoe," the judge said gently, "I'd like to hear from you about what you want. This decision affects your life most directly, and while there are many factors I need to consider, your wishes are important to me." Zoe took a deep breath, her eyes finding Tom's supportive gaze before she began. "After my parents died, I thought I would never feel safe or loved again. When Tom and Lisa adopted me, I was so grateful at first. Tom made me feel welcome from the beginning. He helped me with homework, came to my school events, listened when I talked about my birth parents without making me feel bad for missing them." She paused, gathering courage for what came next. Lisa was different. At first she tried, at least when Tom was around. But when we were alone, she would say things, that I was a burden, that I should be grateful they took me in, that no one else would want a troubled teenager. She would forget to make meals for me, or take away things that were important to me as punishment for tiny mistakes, like leaving a glass in the sink or being 5 minutes late coming home from school. Lisa shifted in her seat, but Zoe continued, her voice growing stronger. "I never told anyone because I was afraid of being sent back into foster care, of losing Tom, who was the only person who made me feel wanted. I thought maybe if I was perfect enough, quiet enough, good enough, Lisa would eventually accept me." The judge listened intently, occasionally making notes but mostly keeping her eyes on Zoe. "What happened on the plane wasn't new or different," Zoe explained. "It was just the first time other people saw it happen, and it was the first time someone like Sophia stood up and said it wasn't okay." She looked directly at the judge now. "I don't hate Lisa. I understand that adopting me was hard for her, that she probably never really wanted to be my mother, but I can't live with her anymore. These past 3 months with just Tom have been the first time I've felt safe since my parents died. I can sleep through the night. I can eat without worrying that I'm taking too much food. I can talk without being afraid my words will be twisted later." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined to finish. "I know families are supposed to stay together if possible, but sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into or even the one that adopts you. Sometimes it's the people who make you feel safe and valued. For me, that's Tom." When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Lisa's lawyer seemed affected by her testimony, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact with his client. The judge thanked Zoe and called a brief recess before she would announce her decision. As Zoe returned to her seat beside Tom, he squeezed her hand, pride evident in his eyes. "That was incredibly brave," he whispered. They waited in tense silence for the judge's return, Zoe's heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Lisa sat rigidly across the room, her expression unreadable. When the judge returned and everyone was seated again, she looked thoughtfully at her notes before addressing the room. "Cases like these are never easy," she began. "They require us to balance many factors: the best interests of the child, the rights of parents, the importance of family unity, and the obligation to protect vulnerable individuals from harm." She looked directly at Lisa. "Mrs. Williams, I acknowledge the steps you've taken in the past 3 months. Therapy and parenting classes are positive actions that show a desire to improve. However, meaningful change takes time, especially when addressing patterns of behavior that have persisted for years." Turning to Tom, she continued, "Mr. Williams, while I appreciate your candor about your past failure to recognize what was happening, in your home I am concerned about separating a child from one of her parents permanently based on a single incident." Zoe's heart sank. Was the judge going to send her back to Lisa? But the judge wasn't finished. However, the incident on that plane was not isolated, according to multiple witnesses and Zoe's own testimony. It was part of a pattern that has caused significant harm to a child who has already experienced profound loss. She straightened her papers decisively. "Therefore, my ruling is as follows. Tom Williams will retain primary physical custody of Zoe, with a continuation of the current living arrangements. Lisa Williams will be granted supervised visitation, contingent upon continued therapy and completion of her parenting program." Relief flooded through Zoe, so intense she felt lightheaded. Tom's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. "This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. The judge," he continued. "At that time, if all parties have complied with the court's requirements and if progress has been made in family therapy, we may consider adjusting the visitation schedule. The goal, where possible and safe, is eventual reconciliation and healing for this family." With a tap of her gavel, the hearing was concluded. Ms. Patel turned to them with a smile, explaining the practical implications of the judge's ruling, the paperwork that would follow, the scheduling of supervised visits, the continuation of therapy for all parties. Lisa sat frozen in her seat, the reality of the decision seemingly still sinking in. When her lawyer whispered something to her, she nodded mechanically, gathering her purse and standing up. For a moment, she looked across the room at Zoe, something unreadable in her expression. Anger, perhaps, or regret, or simply resignation. Then, she turned and walked out without a word, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. Outside the courthouse, the midday sun was bright and warm. Zoe tilted her face up to it, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in hours. "You did it," Tom said, smiling down at her. "You stood up for yourself in there." Zoe shook her head. "We did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Well, technically, you couldn't have done it without Sophia either." A familiar voice called from behind them. They turned to see Sophia walking toward them, still in her flight attendant uniform, rolling a small suitcase behind her. Her face broke into a wide smile as she saw their expressions. "Good news, I take it?" Zoe rushed forward, embracing the woman who had changed the course of her life with one brave intervention. "The judge gave Tom custody," she explained breathlessly. "Lisa gets supervised visits, but I get to stay with Tom in Chicago." Sophia's eyes shone with happiness as she returned the hug. "I knew you could do it. From the moment I saw you on that plane, I knew you had strength in you. You just needed someone to help you find it." The three of them walked together toward a nearby cafe where they had planned to have lunch after the hearing. As they waited for a table, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. "Well, look at that," she said, showing them her screen. "It's from Diane, the other flight attendant from that day. She says congratulations." "You told her about the hearing?" Zoe asked, surprised that the older flight attendant had remembered her. Sophia nodded. "We've all been rooting for you. Alex, too. He texts me sometimes to ask how you're doing." "Speaking of Alex," Tom said, "didn't you mention he's coming to visit his cousin in Chicago next month? Maybe we could all get together." The simple normality of the conversation, Making plans, thinking about the future, struck Zoe suddenly. This was what family was supposed to feel like: safe, supportive, a soft place to land. It had taken a terrible incident, a brave flight attendant, and 3 months of uncertainty to get here. But finally, she had found her home. Their table was ready, and as they settled in, the conversation flowed easily. Sophia shared stories from recent flights. Tom talked about his new position at the Chicago office, and Zoe described her latest English project, a personal essay about finding courage in unexpected places. "I'm thinking of studying psychology in college," Zoe said as they finished their meal. "Maybe becoming a social worker like Vanessa or a therapist like Dr. Reynolds. I want to help other kids who feel like they don't have a voice." Sophia smiled warmly. "I think you'd be amazing at that. You already have the most important qualification: empathy. Plus," Tom added with a touch of pride, "your grades are certainly good enough. Your last English test was what, 98%? Zoe blushed, slightly at the praise, still getting used to having her achievements celebrated rather than minimized. It's easier to focus on school when you're not constantly walking on eggshells at home. As they were leaving the cafe, Sophia's phone buzzed again. She checked it and laughed. "Well, this is interesting timing. My supervisor just emailed me. They're putting together a training program for flight attendants on recognizing signs of abuse or distress in passengers. They want me to help develop it based on my experience." "You should do it," Zoe said immediately. "You could help so many people." Sophia looked thoughtful. "I think I will. Not everyone has your courage to." "Speak up, Zoe. Sometimes they need someone to notice, to see what's happening and step in, like you did," Tom said gratefully. They parted ways outside the cafe, Sophia heading to her hotel to rest before her return flight the next day, promising to visit again soon. As Zoe and Tom walked back to their car, a comfortable silence settled between them. "So," Tom said finally, "what would you like to do with the rest of the day? Celebrate a little?" Zoe considered the question. 3 months ago, her idea of a good day had been one where Lisa largely ignored her. Now the possibilities seemed endless. "Could we go to that bookstore we found last weekend?" she suggested. "The one with the cafe upstairs? I could use some new reading material." Tom smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in the way that had become so familiar and reassuring to Zoe. "Bookstore it is. And maybe ice cream after?" "Definitely ice cream after," Zoe agreed, returning his smile. As they drove through the Chicago streets now becoming familiar and homelike, Zoe thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. One flight, one cup of coffee, one flight attendant who refused to look the other way, and everything had changed. The future still held uncertainties. There would be supervised visits with Lisa to navigate, ongoing therapy to work through the lingering effects of those 3 difficult years, college applications to consider. But for the first time since losing her parents, Zoe wasn't facing these challenges alone or from a place of fear. She had Tom, steady and supportive beside her. She had Sophia and Diane, unexpected allies who had become like family. She had Alex and her new friends at school, Vanessa Cooper and Dr. Reynolds, all the people who had formed a safety net around her when she needed it most. And most importantly, she had found her own voice, the courage to speak her truth and stand up for herself. That, Zoe realized, was perhaps the greatest gift that had come from that terrible day on the plane. Not just escape from Lisa's cruelty, but the discovery of her own strength. As they pulled into the bookstore parking lot, Tom turned to her with a smile. "Ready?" Zoe nodded, returning his smile with one of her own. Genuine, hopeful, no longer shadowed by fear. "Ready," she said, and stepped out into the sunlight, toward whatever came next.